Howdy, partners! The western United States in the 19th century was a colorful place. You had cowboys, gamblers, lawmen, nurses, people carrying out the ethnic cleansing of Native people, and Native Americans resisting that ethnic cleansing. And really, aren't they all deserving of commemoration on the same sheet of stamps? In 1994, that's exactly what we got with the Legends of the West release. This set was notable for a couple of reasons. First, it kicked off the Classic Collection series of stamps, which would have 10 more entries running through 2002. But the real notoriety of the set comes from a misprint in the original run of the stamps, and the way that the Postal Service dealt with that misprint. Let's dig in. Some people might think stamps are boring, and maybe they're right. But in the early 90s, the Citizen Stamp Advisory Committee, the people in charge of choosing the subjects for stamps, were working on a design to honor Ellis Island, the entry point for millions of immigrants in the late 19th and early 20th century. The proposed art they got back, though, they felt was grim and colorless, and this led to a discussion of developing a series of large, colorful sets of stamps. Ones focused on topics of Americana, and they called it the Classic Collection. Ironically, the final release in the collection included a grim black and white photo of a family at Ellis Island. But the first release ran with the idea of American expansion in the late 19th century, and it was called The Legends of the West. Legends of the West has some features that were common to the rest of the Classic Collection. They all have 20 stamps. It has a banner across the top in the selvage, or the area of the pane that isn't actually stamps. The subject matter is a good fit for the collection, which in general can be described as what an old man thinks was peak American culture. There were later sets for classic comics, for old aircraft, for the legends of baseball. The Postal Service knew its audience. The back of the pane gives info about each stamp subject, and also an address to order a hardcover book with more detail about the set, which I have here. The set does a good job of mixing some famous folks with some lesser-known people from the era, and the book has a 4-page section about each one. There's Annie Oakley, Buffalo Bill, and Wyatt Earp. There's John Fremont, who was both an explorer of the West and the first Republican presidential candidate. There's a stamp dedicated to Home on the Range, but apparently not the song. There's no deer or antelope, and the skies are cloudy. The set was prepared and millions of panes were printed in 1993, but late that year, it was brought to the Postal Service's attention that one of the images was incorrect. The stamp labeled Bill Pickett actually had a portrait of his brother Ben Pickett. Apparently, this particular image of Ben had been misidentified as Bill for a long time and in a number of different sources, but several people, including a descendant of Pickett, reported the correction before they went on sale. So that sucks. Printing costs at that point had already reached about $1 million, but the plan was to scrap all of those and reprint using a corrected portrait. The problem was that they had already sent out a bunch of panes to stamp distribution centers and post offices in advance of the for-sale date. But that shouldn't have been a problem, right? You can trust hundreds of post offices to not sell the stamps in advance, right? Yeah, no. 4 post offices sold a total of 186 panes early, and just like with any hobby, that sort of scarcity is annoying for the average collector who isn't willing to shell out thousands of dollars just to complete their collection. The Postal Service actually has a policy against creating intentionally rare and collectible stamps just for that reason. Back in 1962, when they discovered that a single pane of their Dag Hammarskjöld stamp had been sold with an error, they actually went back and reprinted 40 million stamps with the error. You can buy a sheet of them on eBay for like $3. And actually, as a tangent, the Postal Service actually violated this no rare stamps policy pretty recently, and it demonstrated how much of a mess this can be. In 2013, they put out a stamp honoring maybe the most famous stamp error in US history, the inverted Jenny, which was a misprint in 1918 that was found on a single pane of 100 stamps. The image of the plane was printed upside down. The new release was 2.2 million panes of inverted Jennies, but as a promotion, the Postal Service decided to print just 100 panes of inverted Jennies. Or, right side up ones. Get it? As you might expect, collectors started buying a bunch of these stamps to try to get the rare version. One collector wrote an editorial about how he and his wife bought 3,000 of these panes at $12 a piece before getting one, and then turned around and sold it at barely a profit for $52,000. Some of the rare stamps were also supposed to be given out to online orders through a manual process that swapped them into random purchases of the sheet from the previous week. At a certain point, though, the Stamp Fulfillment Service's office forgot to keep doing that, so they went back and randomly mailed a few to some postal customers who had purchased during the period that they had forgotten. in essence, mailing them a free $50,000 gift. The guy who dropped almost $40,000 to find his wasn't thrilled. Anyway, rewind back to 1994 and the Bill Pickett stamp. The Postal Service went back on its initial plan of destroying all the misprint panes and did something halfway in between. They decided to release 150,000 of them. Now, that was more than the demand for them, so they decided to hold a lottery to decide who would receive them. Anyone who mailed a check for $8.70 by October 1st was entered. This is what the winners got. A nice piece of registered mail. I bought this off of eBay. I was not collecting back in '94. But you can see what was included was a stamp, direct mail catalog, a letter informing you that you had won the lottery, and of course the set itself with the error Bill Pickett stamp. So this lottery wasn't 186 panes rare, but 150,000 is still really rare when it comes to US stamps, and early reports show that these were reselling for $400 or $500. But like most modern stamp prices, this declined over the years. 10 years ago, the Scott catalog priced these at $240, but the current one has it at $125. And even then, those prices tend to be inflated. I bought mine with all of the original packaging for $80. Like I say in my intro video, you really shouldn't buy modern stamps for the investment. With this era as background, the stakes were high for the next entry in the Classic Collection, a set of 20 stamps commemorating the Civil War. They called in all the experts to make sure they got things right. During the design process, the artist in charge of the set was quoted by the New York Times as saying, "We're now getting down to recommendations like Jackson's horse's ears weren't quite so dark at the tips, but two experts pointed that out, so I made the change." And it seemed to pay off. There doesn't seem to have been any issues with the artwork, and the set did well, with some of the same promotions as the Legends of the West set. I've got the hardcover book right here, and they're actually one of the initial releases of the Stampers Savers card program, which I have another entire video about. So, cowpokes, that's the tale of the Legends of the West. I think the lesson we can all take away from this is to own up to your mistakes and fix them, and to always trust a lottery to solve your problems. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out some of the other ones on the channel. I mentioned that most of the Classic Collection sets had to do with American culture, but for some reason in 1999, they also made one about insects and spiders. It's weird and cool. Check it out.